So this week we passed a rather grim milestone of 100,000 deaths due to COVID. We've one of the highest death rates in the world, and there are complex reasons for this. Some are quick to blame the government, but whilst they clearly could have done some things a lot better, there are some factors such as the density of our population, our high percentage of older people, high rates of obesity, and the ease of travel that we're always going to make things more difficult for us as a society. COVID has exposed for us many things that are wrong in our society. And it seems to me that the way that we value and treat our older people is one of those things. It's well rehearsed that we as a society have underpaid and undervalued those who care for the elderly, and by implication have undervalued the elderly themselves. It's also the case that more people have died in lower paid or manual work or in care work than in higher paid jobs, where it's usually easier to work from home. So that's another of the elements of our society that seems to be thrown up, exposed by this virus. Amongst some younger people, there has been an attitude that COVID is a problem that affects older people and is not a problem for them, something that they can ignore. They don't need to take precautions. Sadly, of course, some young people do die of COVID, although it is in smaller numbers. And the risky behaviour that some people are guilty of does clearly have a negative effect on many, but especially on the elderly. Here in our readings today, we have two old people who are front and centre. We don't know how old Simeon is, but the implication that he is getting on as he is now being dismissed in peace. Anna, we are told, is 84, which today is a pretty decent age, and in those days was even more decent. I love this story as a meeting across the generations, a young couple with their newborn baby, meeting these two older people with wisdom and insight to share. I remember many years ago preaching on this passage when I was one of the young people, or comparatively young, and that certainly isn't the case anymore. I may now be the same age as Simeon, and I'm certainly closer to the age of Anna now than when I first, became a parent. I'm hoping, though, that I can still get away with saying that we should value our older people without you thinking that I'm telling you that you have to listen to me. As a society, we don't seem to have enough conversations across the generations, and church is one place where those conversations can happen. Sadly, in many of our churches, there isn't so much opportunity for this as the mix of generations isn't there. My hope for Sacred Trinity is that we will keep some kind of mix of the generations and that we will be able to learn from each other. So what is the wisdom that these two older people are revealing? They've both been waiting a long time to see God at work. They are holy people of God who give time to prayer and worship, and they are longing for God to be revealed amongst them. I'm sure that they would have had some spiritual highs along the way, but we have the sense here that they have been waiting a very long time. They've been faithful in prayer despite not seeing God's salvation until now. They've been faithful in prayer and worship despite being in a time of darkness. They've been faithful to God despite so much that is wrong in the world. They long to see God take care of their people of Israel, and perhaps also a longing for God to be at work in the wider world, bringing peace and justice and healing for all. And here, on this day, they are in the temple and they see this young couple who have probably just had their newborn baby boys circumcised, and they sense that in this child, God is doing a new thing. It's not all going to be easy. There is much pain and heartache to come. That's made clear by Simeon in his words to Mary after he's blessed the baby. There is also quite a leap of faith here, and perhaps to echo what Dovrig was saying last week, there might be an element in here of looking back on these events after a lot of reflection. Simeon proclaims that God's light is revealed, that he has seen your salvation. But of course, in actual fact, all he has seen is a vulnerable, weak baby, the child of two very ordinary parents. But in this baby, we are told, God's salvation is to be found. In many ways, we are in very difficult times, but we would do well to remember the patience and the faithfulness of Anna and Simeon, and to spend a few moments with them, looking into the face of the baby, and to pray too that we might see the salvation which you have made ready in the sight of the nations, a light of revelation for the Gentiles and glory for your people Israel.